Well, good morning. Welcome. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here this morning for this dedication and tribute. Uh, Today's a very special dedication as we are dedicating three separate plaques. First, a plaque honoring F Company, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines, 4th Marine Division. We also have a plaque honoring a friendship under fire between two foxhole buddies, Private Jack Sims and Private Roy Stewart, who remained friends for their entire life, and a plaque honoring Ensign Jane L. Kendi, a Navy nurse that was the first flight nurse in active duty on Iwo Jima. You will hear more about them shortly. But we will begin our dedication today with the Pledge of Allegiance and the Marine hymn, if you would please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On behalf of the National Museum of the Pacific War and the Admiral Nimitz Foundation, we welcome you here today. This memorial courtyard stands as a everlasting tribute to the men and women who answered the call to service to their company, to their country. I've witnessed many visitors go from plaque to plaque reading about these brave men and women. Welcome. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz was born across the street, across Main Street, about a block up. And he grew up in his grandfather's hotel here. Today, the hotel is host to the Nimitz Gallery, detailing the life and service of Admiral Nimitz. Shortly before his death in 1966, some people in the community came to the Admiral and asked him if we could open a museum in his honor in this old hotel. He said yes, under two stipulations. One, that they be restored to the Steamboat Hotel facade, and secondly, that it would be dedicated not to him, but to the men and women who served under him. And so our motto has always been, we inspire our youth by honoring our heroes. And today the word hero is attached to celebrities and sports players, but those are not the true heroes. It's people like those that we are honoring today that exemplify the true meaning of heroism. We gathered here today to honor Roy Stewart and Jack Sims and Jane Kendi and those men of Fox Company. They and their fellow servicemen and women stepped forward to do their duty willingly because they were patriots. And they knew that they were all that stood between their homeland and those that would destroy it. They gave up part of their youth, and in too many cases their lives, for us. Their sacrifice guarantees the way of life we enjoy today. And mere thanks isn't enough. To them we owe a debt that we can never repay, but can and must be honored. And we do honor them today and pledge that their service and sacrifice will be remembered and honored. These plaques that cover these stone walls that once formed the corral here at the Nimitz Hotel are dedicated to those soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen who carried the Pacific War to the enemy in the name of freedom, and they are a permanent part of the National Museum of the Pacific War. These plaques and all they represent will be here for your grandchildren's grandchildren to understand how much they and succeeding generations owe to those who went before. Today, the United States of America still has warriors around the world putting their lives at risk to protect those same freedoms for which we fought, which they fought. We owe them our everlasting respect, our gratitude, and most of all, our support. We do honor every sailor, soldier, Marine, and airman who sailed the seas, climbed the hill, flew the skies, and answered the call, and many who paid the price, who never let us down. These that we honor here today are important to you, your family members, and we are honored to have these plaques in our courtyard because their story is the story of the fabric of America and what keeps us together as a nation. At this time, I believe, are you going to go first, Steve? We're going to hear from some people that are eyewitnesses to some of this stuff in a secondhand way.
Good morning, everyone. On a very pleasant, mercifully pleasant Saturday morning here in Texas in mid-June, but a terrific morning. Thank you, Greg, for those comments. It's my privilege to stand here on behalf of the Marines and of the family members of the Marines of Company F, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines, which they knew and still know to this day, the family members, as 2F-23. Now, Marines today would say, now that's backwards. Why'd you write it that way? It should be F-223. But early in the war, that's the way they wrote it. And so for the rest of their lives, those Marines knew themselves as members of 2F-23. Not so much a unit designation, but as a name. So it's a pleasure and a privilege, really, to be here today and dedicate a plaque in their honor. And so would welcome you for that event. Now, lest anyone is not all that familiar with the context of a rifle company, I thought I would talk about that in just a few moments. The rifle company was the tip of the spear for the Marine Corps, certainly in World War II. Roughly, the numbers would vary, but figure 220, 230 Marines in a rifle company. There were 3 in a battalion landing team. And a battalion landing team, or BLT, is responsible for making those amphibious assaults through the Central Pacific. And in the Central Pacific, those were typically across coral reefs. Fox Company made 4 such landings. And to explain a little bit, as Lieutenant General Larry Snowden said, and he was one of the company commanders leading Fox Company at Iwo Jima, he was in command. But he explained at one time that it was their job to storm ashore on an enemy-held island and to seize that island from the enemy and to plant the flag and say, we're in charge. So these guys lived at the tip, the pointy end of that spear up there where war is its most savage, with rifles and fighting knives, having to seek out the enemy and, if necessary, even hand-to-hand combat and be prepared. It was the Marine Corps' job to make them prepared so that do all they could to make sure that that Marine in that situation could fight to the death and win. The Marine Corps also, very importantly, did all they could to make sure that that Marine never had to do that alone. And it became the natural state for these Marines that their natural state was together. And if the enemy did anything to interfere with that, they would fight to the death to remedy that situation, to be back together, to fight as one and win as one. So that's what these rifle companies were responsible for out there. They did the dirty work. There were 162 Marine Corps rifle companies in the Central Pacific and 6 Marine divisions, 27 rifle companies in the 4th Marine Division, which Fox Company was a part of. Of those, well, let's just put it this way. Fox Company overall, during its existence, its 40 months of existence in the Pacific, during World War II, 783 Marines came across the rolls, the muster rolls of Fox Company. And of those, 380 of those Marines actually went to combat with the company. 292 recorded casualties in combat. That's probably, with research that indicates probably 20% low or more, 25% perhaps. 73 of those Marines, Fox Company Marines, were killed in combat. 2 others were died in non-combat situations on Maui, so 75. And after the war was over, most of those were reinterred and brought back to the United States. 21 of these guys were buried or commemorated at the Punch Bowl Cemetery in Honolulu. Some other numbers that might be of interest. During their 40 months of existence, those who had been there from the earliest of days spent as much as 6 months at sea on ships, 16 ships, different ships, sailed something over 27,000 miles. You know, the circumference of the Earth is, 24.9, just under 25,000. It's a lot of time aboard ship. They were based on Maui throughout their combat experience and sailed to all of their operations back and forth from Maui through the Marshall Islands and to the Marianas and so forth on to Iwo Jima, which was their final operation. And I should say that Fox Company, as part of the 4th Marine Division, participated in 4 amphibious operations. One in the Marshalls at Roy Namur, then Saipan, then Tinian, and then Iwo Jima, which certainly became the zenith and the nadir of their experience during World War II. And as the title of our book indicates, the Black Dragon for those Marines as well, which I could speak to. Years later, 40 years later, they began to get back together, those who had survived, and began a reunion era, of which I was very privileged to be a part, beginning from the mid-90s. And they got back together, interestingly, not to refight the war, but to be back together. And as a young fellow coming in there wanting to hear war stories, I was very fortunate that I maybe had the insight to see to it that none of them dreaded seeing me coming. So it was important to just simply be part of what they were doing. Go play golf, go out to eat, go drinking, whatever it might be, traveling with them, and be part of and try to understand what was important to them as a team and as a unit and as a family. We'll share with you a few comments here from a couple of the Marines that I think are relevant to what we're doing here today. The company gunnery sergeant, Harold J. Douglas, who lived in Lubbock, Texas, explained, I think, quite well what it was like, and I think many of us who have family members who served would start to understand from this. He had been in Lubbock, Texas for many years and had never really talked with anybody about his wartime service. You think 16 million Americans, that's 1 in every 10 persons alive in America, from toddlers to great-grandma, served in uniform during the war. 1 in 10. So these folks came back, those who survived, and they got busy getting back to the things they wanted to do before they had to go to war. And Gunny Douglas's comments, I think, reflect that. And he said, I had one of my fellow deacons in my church that had a family about like mine, and we were real close family with children and church and friends and all of that. And we had Sunday dinner together at each other's houses and visited for a long time. And I remember it was 25 years later that something about Iwo Jima was mentioned, and I said, well, I was at Iwo Jima. And he said, well, I didn't know that. He said, you see, in 25 years, that subject had never come up. Not in the circles that we were in. It wasn't something we talked about or even thought about anymore. Back then, we had gone to a different world. And some comments I would share with you from Sergeant Bill Wyckoff from Fox Company. He said, when thinking back about F Company, we were certainly a diverse and different group of Marines, short, tall, East Coast, West Coast, rebels and Yanks, now all from different backgrounds. And we all suffered in combat by our losses of our dearest friends. God, how it hurt when one of ours was cut down. And yes, we cried unashamed when a life was snuffed out. Many of us had shared the same foxholes together, and some have been friends and buddies since joining the Corps. I have never seen, nor will I ever see again, as much respect and love for each other as I did for our F Company. It didn't matter if we'd fought through all 4 campaigns or 1 beachhead. I held a young Marine in my arms to comfort him as his life ebbed away. He had been in combat for 5 hours, which was an eternity for him. And he could now say, I served my time in hell. So it was my privilege as honorary member of Fox Company and enough two F-23 to attempt to capture and convey their wartime experience and post-war experience in the book Black Dragon, and to present not my own view of things, because that has no value, but rather to present their view of things, because that is reality. And so it is in a spirit of thanks that we dedicate this plaque today to that little rifle company known as 2F-23, representative of all the 162 Marine rifle companies in the Pacific during the war. And the guys would be tickled to see this. They loved 2F-23, and they loved each other. Semper Fidelis. Nancy.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah. It's great to be with you. Thank you, Steve. My name is Nancy Stewart Harrelson, and I'm the youngest daughter of Roy Stewart Jr. And I want to say a few words here. First of all, I want to thank Jane Sims Love, who is the daughter of Jack Sims. Jane joined me in designing and writing and making this plaque happen, donating it to the museum. And unfortunately, she couldn't be here with us today, but I want to thank Jane. Together, Jane and I would like to thank the museum, and we'd like to thank General Salazar. We really want to thank Stephanie Hagee. Thank you so much for all of the changes that we made back and forth on the plaque. You know, I was telling Stephanie before we started, the highest compliment my dad could give anything was that it was just right. And when Steve wrote his book, he was able to get a copy of it, an early draft, to Daddy and the other Marines while they were still living. And Daddy read it and he said, Steve got it just right. And that's the highest compliment he could give anything. And so Jane and I were determined to get this just right. So we thank you for all that you did to make that happen. I also want to thank Jane and Steve for helping and assisting in the design of this plaque. Steve was able to isolate a group picture from EWO of just our two dads and took the other guys out of the background. So that was really great. It was great that they were in the front of that picture together. So thank you for that and for helping with the wording and the historical accuracy. And Jane and I also want to posthumously thank and honor Irby Hip, Sam Haddad, and all the other commanders that were on EWO, because we believe that under their dedicated command, we owe the lives of our fathers and ultimately our own lives and our own existence to them, because they kept our young 18-year-old fathers alive, and they survived miraculously without injury to return home. I'd also like to thank the museum and Steve for organizing and executing the February event where we honored the 80th anniversary of the Marine Corps landing on Iwo Jima. It was a first-class stellar event to honor our Marines, and it was just right. I'm extremely grateful for that event, mostly for being able to meet the other children of the Marines, because I was never able to attend any of their reunions. The guys always got together in August or September, and I'm a school teacher, and I couldn't miss the first of school, so I could never go with them. But I got to meet a lot of them in February, and we really enjoyed talking about our dads. Jack and Roy were both 17 when they joined the Marine Corps. They both turned 18 in the fall of 1944. Roy in September and Jack in November. They became friends at Camp Pendleton and served the entire Battle of Iwo Jima as foxhole buddies, except for one night they were together. And you can read more about their battle experience on our plaque and in Steve McLeod's book, Black Dragon. You know, Roy and Jack had a very special bond that extended beyond the war. And Jane reminded me of that our mothers became friends, They went on a lot of trips together. They went to Hawaii together. They went to Washington, D.C. together to see the World War II monument and to visit the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico. They also, of course, went to multiple 2F-23 reunions, most of which were held at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So they spent a lifetime being friends. And both Jack and Roy participated separately. I don't know if y'all remember the honor flights that took place to take veterans to Washington, D.C. And that particularly meant a lot to my dad and Jack because they weren't able to come home when the war was over. They went to Japan to be part of the occupational force. And so they didn't get that welcome home. And that honor flight was really, really special and important to them. When I was here in February and speaking to the other family members, we were talking about our dads. And to a person, every single child of Marine, when discussing our fathers, described them as happy, optimistic, great sense of humor, men who enjoyed every moment of life and lived it to the absolute fullest. Daddy and Jack went home after the war, and they each built their professional lives back in their hometown, but they also lived a life of service to their community. And so as we were speaking with one another in February, I began to wonder how in the world could these men who had been through such a horror be so positive and optimistic and love life so much? How could they do that, knowing what they went through when they were teenagers? Well, in the 1980s, our local newspaper interviewed my dad, Roy, one year for Veterans Day, and the article was called Greater Love in God-Forsaken Places. And in discussing that article with my dad, he elaborated on it, which he never talked about the war, but as he got older, he began to tell me a little bit about it and about his experience as an 18-year-old in combat on Iwo. And I'm going to do my best to channel him. But he said, I'm going to tell you something, Nancy. Iwo looked and smelled exactly like what I had pictured hell to be like. It smelled of sulfur, and it was black sands. And if there was a hell on earth, Iwo was it. I had two great fears on Iwo, Nancy. One of my fears was, that E Company, they were always getting too far forward. And they'd have to pass back through our lines at night. And I was terrified that when I was on night watch, I was going to shoot one of our Marines. And I'd always ask them, "Are you the last man? Are you the last man?" Because I didn't want to hit one of our guys. And my other equally terrifying fear was that I was going to fall asleep on night watch. And the Japanese were going to overrun our foxhole and kill Jack. And he said that was terrifying. So eventually the battle ended, and we're getting ready to leave Iwo. And I walked through the 4th Marine Division cemetery. And then, we'd had those same clothes on for 6 weeks. And they burned all our clothes. And they gave us fresh clothes. And we went aboard ship to leave. And we got a shower, and we got a hot meal for the first time in 6 weeks. And I was going to get to sleep somewhere that wasn't a foxhole for the first time in 6 weeks. And I was looking forward to that night's sleep, but you know what? I had horrible nightmares all night long. Horrible nightmares. And he said, my nightmare was I had fallen asleep on night watch, and the Japanese had killed Jack. So the next morning I got up on deck, and there was a religious service, and I didn't miss one of those, Nancy. It could have been Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, doesn't matter. I want to make sure my bases were covered. But this happened to be a Protestant service, and I went, and from where I was sitting, I could see the 4th Marine Division cemetery. And I had the strongest urge to get up and jump off the side of that ship and went and swim back to that cemetery because I didn't want to leave my guys behind. But I stayed where I was, and the chaplain started his sermon. And the text of his sermon was John 15:13. Greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. And that set just right with me. And I never had another nightmare after that. In fact, Nancy, I've never had another dream that I can remember since that day, that I can recall. So I never really understood the meaning of this until this past February, when the museum hosted this event that brought us all together under Steve's leadership as well. The reason all of those guys lived such full lives, joyful lives, was not only out of gratitude for having survived, but they lived lives for the ones they left behind in the 4th Marine Division Cemetery, the ones that couldn't come home, the men that they always referred to as the real heroes. Living life with generosity, joy, hospitality, and kindness, serving your community, doing your work in your chosen profession, whatever that is, living with purpose and with the mindset of serving others, not only honors those for whom you grieve, but it builds community and it brings people together. It has a lasting impact on everyone whom you touch in big and small ways. It's the way to end the divisions in our country, and may we be reminded today that we are all Americans. And despite the obvious divisions in our country, we owe, as was said earlier, a great debt of gratitude to these men and women and the thousands of others like them who served in the Pacific and European theaters during World War II, who came home and built their lives and their livelihoods with optimism and in service to their communities. I hope we can all do the same. May we follow their example and keep their memories alive. Thank you, and Semper Fidelis.
Good morning. My name is Julie Wright, and I'm here to dedicate this plaque to my grandmother, Jane Louise Kendi Shepperton, who was the first female to step foot on an active battlefield. Anyway, growing up, I never knew about her history or her impact on history, because she and my grandfather, Lieutenant Robert Shepperton, a Navy pilot, never spoke about their military service. We grandchildren only knew them as Dita and Papa. In one of the letters my grandmother wrote home, dated September 24th, 1945, while in Guam, my great-grandmother must have been feeling ill, because my grandma wrote, "Listen, Mother, if you aren't feeling well, go to the doctor." Listen was underlined once, go was underlined 4 times. That was her as a nurse talking to her mom. Please don't let this go. I can tell you that in my grandfather's autobiography, he wrote for my mom, her sisters, and us grandchildren, that he proposed to her multiple times before she said yes. In another letter written home, dated October 12th, 1945, while in Olathe, Kansas, which is about an hour from where I live currently, she wrote, I thought maybe it would be rather nice of you to put an announcement in the paper of my engagement as long as I'm not home. I really don't care what you say, but this might, anyway, so she was saying, it was going to happen. I'm so glad that she finally said yes. One childhood memory I have of Dita was when she was making chocolate chip cookies at their house in San Diego, California. This house was where they settled after retiring from their military service. She called me in to the kitchen and let me get a finger scoop of the dough. I used my finger to get the biggest scoop I could as a small child. I wasn't even a teenager yet when she died. But as I grew older, I began to understand bits and pieces of her military service. It wasn't until one day that I had commented on a picture of my grandmother on an internet page stating, "That's my grandma." And then I received a message through Facebook Messenger from Steve McLeod, who was reaching out to learn more about her. Some years later, Steve asked me if I had a hard copy picture of my grandmother comforting Bill Wyckoff. I had said no, so he ordered one for me, which I framed. I also have a jar of sand from where Bill landed on Iwo Jima under the framed picture, which hangs above my fireplace. This way. Fast forward to Saturday, February 22nd of this year. And I got to meet him in person, the son of that wounded Marine that my grandmother was pictured comforting. I cried a lot that weekend. Can you guess why? And now today, I have the honor of dedicating my grandmother's plaque. Adina, I love you, I miss you, and I'm so very proud of you. Thank you.
Those were wonderful, wonderful stories and wonderful talks, and everybody did such a great job.
I don't know how to follow any of those things, but growing up in a Marine Corps family, I've had a little glimpse of what that bond is. And I tell people here that my granddad has a plaque, and I can look at it and see it right there. And we were blessed to have him here when we dedicated the plaque, and he did not want the plaque. He said, once again, the heroes were the ones who didn't make it. But I'll never forget, he said, now I'm forever with my guys. And your guys are forever together, and we are honored to have them here today. And we recently revamped our genealogical society. I've been in touch with all of you about sons and daughters, and Julie was the only one who got her paperwork in time. But I just want to congratulate you, give you your certificate and your pin, and welcome to the family. And we hope that the rest of you will enjoy a part of it. We're trying to tell the stories because that's what's important. And now I'll give you back your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie does a great job here, and she's a wonderful asset to the museum. We'll go over here, we'll unveil the plaques, and then Bill Smallwood will play taps.